find these images disturbing, but America wants to take a closer look at factory farms like the one seen in this file footage. And now critics are saying they're not just cruel, they're also bad for our communities, our lakes, our rivers, our streams. 9 billion with a B farm animals are reportedly raised and killed for food in this country every year. And now there's a growing number of Americans asking, where does all the waste from all those animals go? So with me tonight, Gene Bauer, who is the president and co-founder of Farm Sanctuary and author of the fantastic book, Farm Sanctuary, Changing Hearts and Minds about Animals and Food. You were recently down south, Gene, looking into all of this. What did you find out?
That's right. I went to North Carolina and visited with our friends with the Waterkeeper Alliance, who actually go around and sample water near these hog factories. And they were taking samples of this brown water. There's these sprayers that spray liquid manure in these communities. And, you know, it wafts into neighbors' yards. They can't go outside. There's flies. There's stench. Destroys property values, destroys rural communities, horrible for neighbors, horrible for animals. These animals are treated like commodities. They're put in these cages so they can't turn around for their whole lives. It's bad for animals, bad for people. It's an industry that needs to be stopped.
Now, here's a former pig farmer that you talked to on your trip who also agreed with you that there's a problem here.
I won't be very good to those people. I got to think, what right did I have to make money off the backs of people's environment? What kind of man was I?
Now, we reached out to the National Pork Producers Council, and they did not return our call by showtime, but they're invited on our show anytime. The Environmental Protection Agency has talked about this on their website. They say when improperly stored or used, animal waste can pollute rivers and underground drinking water supplies. The EPA tells us that a single dairy cow produces about 120 pounds of wet manure every single day. That's a lot of waste in one day, and that's just one single animal. Quickly, your thoughts on that?
There's just too many animals being raised for slaughter. There's too much manure being produced. The land cannot absorb it. It's getting into the waterways, and it's destroying our environment.
And we need to look at this because we all live in this country. You went down there. Now, I want to go to a stat that we got from the Environmental Protection Agency that, once again, it's pretty shocking. I didn't know this. A single dairy cow produces about 120 pounds of wet manure every day. That is a lot of manure. Where does it go?
Well, these industrial animal factories store this manure in these open cesspools, and oftentimes it gets into groundwater, it gets into surface water. In some cases, they have so much that these cesspools won't hold it, and they'll actually start spraying it out into the environment. So there's too much manure. We need to move away from this industrial animal farming system towards, you know, thankfully there is more farmers markets. There's more healthful food that's being made available that does not come from these factory farms, and people need to eat their veggies, like you were saying before.
Yeah, we were talking about Rosie O'Donnell, and she had a wake-up call, an aha moment after having a heart attack. But let me get back to the people who live in these communities. You talked to some of them. Are they happy about the industrial farming being in their neighborhood?
No, it's very sad. You know, a lot of times these are poor communities, and people, you know, are very concerned. They can't even go out in their backyards. They can't hang their clothes on the clothesline without them smelling. Their property values are depressed. They get sick from being in these sick environments. It's something that's very disturbing to see.
So why don't the local politicians do something about it?
Well, unfortunately, you have big industries with, you know, big payrolls, and they have invested in the political system for decades, and they continue doing so. So a lot of these political representatives are representing industrial interests, not people's interests, and that's a huge problem.
Well, I remember years ago, it was too many years to even tell you, I was a local reporter down a very small town, and quite often the landfills, the garbage dumps were put in areas where there were poor communities, and because they didn't have the clout that some of the wealthier communities had. Is it kind of the same thing?
It's exactly the same thing. And you know, the industrial animal farming business has been investigating, or has been investing in the political process for years in Washington, D.C., as well as in state capitals. They control many of the laws and policies that are adopted by lawmakers. And that makes it very hard for people in these rural communities who are trying to stop these factory farms.
But there is one area where people have a lot of power, and that's as consumers, because at the end of the day, it's a consumer decision. So as a consumer, think about where you want to put your money and think about your health.